Hey everybody, Jamie Kelly here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Season 3 of the Approximate Podcast. Be sure to join our Patreon for only $5 a month to see all of Season 3's episodes in full HD video. That's patreon.com/approximate podcast. If you're already a patron, thank you so much for your support. And to everyone who's tuned in, we love you all. And now, on with the show. Kitty! Fucking stop it! God damn it. Fucking cat. Yeah, you. Oi. Scrapple. Stop it. Alright, cut. We're done. Fucking cat. God damn it. Gabby Graveyard. How are you doing, sweetheart?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. Love to have you here. So you're just coming off work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say the name of the company, but like you're the first person that we've had on the podcast that actually is in the industry that has an actual day job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a retail job, so it's kind of like a part-time thing, you know.
Right.
But
So this is like a very interesting thing for me to talk about because I'm used to being around people that whose like history are like I don't have access to because all I know them from and all they present themselves with is being a part of the industry. Now you're new to the industry.
Yep.
And you have a day job. So this is very interesting. So I think like the first question I want to ask is like what's the difference? Like did you start are you new to Vegas?
yes, I actually. So I moved out to Vegas to do porn.
Okay.
And I that's actually a funny story in of its own. And I'll put a pin in that for a second. But I came out here to start doing porn, and I started in the industry for a couple of months until I found the specific place that I work at now as my day job, and I just applied there because I really wanted to work there.
Okay,
It's
so
more about the experience of working. I work at a punk rock clothing store and record store.
gotcha.
And I've never worked at a record store before, so I really wanted to because I love music.
So there were like two passions at play.
Yeah.
You came out here to do the porn. Now, did you have to take we'll just call it a quote unquote day job out of necessity or because it was something that you wanted to do, or did it just happen to be cool that you found a day job that like met your mindset?
So to an extent, I had a decent amount of money saved up before I moved out here, and I was kind of living entirely off of it for the first few months. So I wasn't making like a whole lot of money in porn right in the beginning, because no one ever is right when they, at the very, very first couple weeks, months.
Well, maybe we should step back a little bit. Like, you had an idea to get into porn.
I always
but
knew I
you're
wanted to do
transfer
porn.
here to Las Vegas. So let's step back a little bit. Where were your humble beginnings? Where did you start from, and how did you how'd you figure your way into Vegas?
Yeah, so that's the funny story, actually. I grew up in Indiana, in a very small town just outside of Indianapolis. It's a pretty cool area, I guess, but there's not a whole lot of porn there.
Well, sure. Yeah.
But
there's no hub of production.
yeah, I lived in Hawaii for a few years.
Really?
Yeah, mostly for my old job that I had before I started doing this. And I got really involved in the kink scene, the kink community there in Hawaii. And I knew I was in the military when I was there, and I knew like as soon as I got out of the military that I wanted to do porn. And so I was talking to my just like a good friend of mine in the kink scene there about it. And it just so happened that he worked at Groovy for 17 years. So he was like, I'll...
Well, go ahead and drop a name. Groovy's friendly with his podcast. Who was it?
Dev. His name is Dev.
Cool. Yeah.
You know him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a lovely guy. I love him. I don't think anyone does rope better than Dev. He's fantastic.
Really?
Oh
I did
yeah.
not know that.
No, he is just like crazy.
Oh.
Cool. He actually owns his own dungeon now. It's called
Oh,
House
shit.
Nawa. Yeah, it's
Nice.
really
Out in
cool.
Hawaii.
in Honolulu. I haven't gotten to see it yet because I left the island before it opened. But I'm gonna go. I'm gonna make a trip back there because I have so many friends there. And I want to go see
Super
them.
cool.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what was it that what was the trigger that you said Vegas is where I want to
So
be?
That's where the funny story comes in. Dev had given me like a list of people's names who work at Groovy and was like, you should reach out to all of these people. And I did. And, there was a few different names of like producers. And my original thought was I'm going to move to LA because that's where Groovy is headquartered. And Groovy was like the only company that I could really think of because I just didn't know enough. I didn't know anything. And I was just like, okay, that's the one company that I have like an in with. So I'll move to LA. So I started talking to Buddy Wood because he's the Groovy producer in LA. And he and I had like, we exchanged a few DMs on Twitter. And he was like, well, if you're ever in LA, let me know. And then I was like, okay, I'm moving to LA. And then I looked into it and I was like, I can't afford a place anywhere in LA.
LA is
like,
prohibitively expensive as a single
Visit.
individual.
I lived out there for 4 years. It's not easy.
Yeah, I was like, that's not happening. So then I reached out to one of the other names on the list, which was Radius Dark.
Yeah.
And
San Francisco, that area, Bay Area shooter. Yeah.
and well, he's
Now he's here.
Yeah,
Well, now he's here. Yes, that's our main Vegas producer.
Yeah, that's right.
I talked to him and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to work with you if you can make it out to Vegas, let me know. But I travel a lot, so maybe I'll plan a trip to the Midwest and I'll let you know." And I was like, "Okay, well that's like, that's like commitment there." So I was like, "Okay, I'm moving to Vegas." So like a week after he and I talked, and that was the only time that we had ever talked. That one conversation on Twitter, and then like a week later, I texted him. I was like, "Hey, I'm in Vegas," and he's like, "You want to work tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sure."
Nice.
Nice.
So it kind of moved that quickly for me
Oh, yeah.
when I got out here. It was
Ray's
super cool.
people too.
Yeah, he's a really good friend of mine now. He's really, really cool, and
Yeah.
I'm very glad now that I moved to Vegas instead of LA because I just have so many friends here.
Well, that's the thing. There's such a concentration in Vegas of not only performers, but producers and people that you like to know insofar as you're wanting to be a part of this business. It's very concentrated.
Yeah.
I know that like LA has its allure.
Yeah, well, I mean,
And I had it seen too. Yeah.
at the time I had never been to LA or Vegas in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
Like ever, not even for a second.
But it sounds like you learned real quick.
Yeah, knowing what I know now, I'm
Knowing what
so
you know
glad that
now.
I moved to Vegas instead of to
Well, a lot of people moved from LA to here
Yeah.
because the trans industry is pretty much
it's here.
centrally located here now.
Fantastic. I don't give a shit what anybody sees right now. I just want to remark that I love that when you coughed, you went like that.
Well, I didn't want to deafen you guys.
That's a natural
I work for people.
positive response to do that.
As an editor, I work for so many podcasts,
Stick the whole mic in their mouth.
and I work for people. I'm not going to name names, but I work for people who ought to know better that just go, and everybody cover your ears, that go, and you went without, this is your first podcast, right?
Yeah, well, I've recorded music before. And it's the same kind of thing when you're recording vocals to like turn away if you're breathing in or something.
And you
already got
literally
mic etiquette.
just
Yeah.
There you
had
go.
that predisposed etiquette to just go, I'm about to cough. And you did the right thing. I love that about you. Love that about you.
Thank you.
So how long have you been in Vegas right now?
I moved here late December of last year of 2022.
So you're
Been
about a
5
year
months.
in?
5 months.
5 months, not even.
What year is it now?
2023.
No, I moved here in December. I've been here for about 5 months.
5 months.
About 5 months.
And it seems like you've been like acclimated, like you got a day job.
Oh, I don't think that I fit in better in any place ever. Like Vegas is just my city.
Nice.
I'm so glad.
You know, I felt that same way too when I moved out here about 3 years ago. And I just felt there was this thing where I moved to Vegas and it just all
just clicked. Yeah.
It just clicked.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew that this was a much better foundation by which to start doing anything that I was interested in. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's the vibe that you have for yourself as well.
Definitely. Vegas is just the place I think I was meant to be. It's cool. There's the porn's here, the punk rock is here, there's music's here.
The entertainment's here. There's
weird stuff here. You know, you see a lot of weird stuff here, and I love
Vegas,
that. I love it. I know, right?
Yeah. It's
Awesome.
a very novel place.
It is.
So there's a lot to experience as just a person that imbibes, life. But
And for what it's worth, it's pretty trans inclusive too, all things considered.
Oh yeah, we got a great LGBTQ center here.
I was
just came from there
gonna
today.
say,
Yeah.
for people in our position, even if they're outside of the industry, for people in our position and people in the industry, not only is there all that like magic to see, but there is so much opportunity that is like so rooted and solid, and the foundation is here to
Community,
where
opportunity, stuff like that. Yeah.
there's opportunity,
Community
like
as well.
real opportunity. So I it sounds like you're really picking up on that.
Oh, yeah.
And Stephanie and I have, and
This is
I just
2019.
love it to death.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the pandemic happened 5 months after we were here, so
I've never
everything
been to,
died.
Yeah, I've never been to Vegas pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I'd imagine
That was
it would've been
different now,
different.
then.
It would have been a different,
Yeah.
different Vegas. Huh?
So, outside of the industry, now I'm going to get a little deep. Forgive me if I, overextend my bounds. But outside of the industry and outside of your workaday life, what is life in Vegas like for you?
In Vegas,
Now that this is your home, right?
yeah,
This is where you essentially feel like you're planting roots in.
yeah. Well, I have like one really, really, really close friend who I spend a lot of my time with.
Yeah.
I met them at one of the goth clubs that I go to. There's a bunch of
wait a
nightclubs
minute.
that are pretty cool.
I got to interrupt you. I'm a goth club kid from way back.
Yeah.
And I've been like,
Searching. Where is this?
I've been
golf club you're
searching
talking
and
about?
people have been telling me about like cool goth clubs to hang out. In 3 years that I've been in Vegas, I still haven't visited one. It sounds like you have.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I did when I got out here. I was like, I gotta go to because I used to go in Indianapolis. There's a group called Spellbound Indie, and they have like probably one of the coolest goth nights that I've ever been to, and they only did it once a month, but this place here in Vegas does it every week.
What is it? What's the name of the club?
It's called Artifice.
Artifice.
Okay, I've heard of
Artifice.
that one actually.
And
in the arts
it's
district.
a club that like hosts a goth night, or they goth all 7 days a week.
Well, I've only ever been there on Saturdays. Saturdays are like their big night, and there's no cover either, which is pretty cool on Saturday, unless there's a band playing, which sometimes there is, but usually there's not, and there's no cover. if
Head
there isn't.
charge for the good band.
Saturdays at Artifice.
yeah, but-
good goth night.
Yeah, I mean the whole club, like bar, the whole area, just like the walls are black. It's got like pillars, and it looks goth, right? So I don't know what they do every other day of the week. I don't actually know.
You're saying it looks like a permanent goth.
I
thing.
mean, it
sounds
looks
like
like
a-
a permanent goth.
Artifice sounds like a goth club too.
Yeah,
This
and
sounds-
the guy who owns it is the DJ on the goth nights, and he
okay.
comes into my store a lot, and he's a pretty goth dude.
Okay.
This sounds very familiar. Like again, I'm very old. People who listen to this podcast, they know I'm old as hell. But this sounds so familiar to like what my story is. And real quick, when I was in my 20s, not that I'm not, but when I was in my early 20s, it was Dallas. And it was a place called a really big dance club called the Lizard Lounge. And on Sunday and Thursday nights, the club changed around. It was called the Church.
Yeah.
And it was the exact same thing. It was so ornate. And you're talking about pillars and everything's in black and there's red velvet.
Yeah, they got the
everywhere,
velvet
and-
curtains that Artifice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
like
same
that
thing.
perfect
goth,
goth dance
yeah.
club experience. And I spent, the majority of like a decade at that place just hanging out and having a great time
Yep.
and feeling like I was amongst my own.
Yeah.
And I feel that's like a really cool thing to have You know, like
Gotta have
at least
community,
for
especially growing
people of
up.
our mindset,
Yeah.
it's really good to have a place like that.
Yeah.
Now, I've been in Vegas for 3 years. I've never heard of this artifice place, but I'm super stoked to go check it out on your recommendation because, dude, those feelings, that vibe of being in a goth dance club
I
and
know.
just meeting folks.
There's something
That's
special
something
to
that it is special. It's a special thing for a certain kind of group of people.
Yeah.
And knowing that we have a place like that here in Vegas, I'm super stoked to like visit a place like that.
Yeah, I've always been into goth music. Well, not always, but I had gotten into it well before I'd ever gone to a goth club. Is when I was living in Australia. I took a trip with my friend to Melbourne.
Wait a
and this
minute,
was,
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Hawaii, Australia?
Don't just
Jeez Louise.
don't just do that. Don't just
Yeah.
say when I was
When I
living
was-
in Australia.
Write it off. Yeah.
How old are you?
I am okay.
Are you a vampire? Is that why you're into God? You've been living, but how old actually are you?
I'm like 600 years old. So.
Australia.
Yeah. Well, so I'll circle back around to that in a second.
Okay.
But, at the time I was 19, and in America you gotta be 21 to drink anywhere, so you can't
course,
drink or whatever, or you can't go into like bars,
Yeah.
or clubs.
Liquor license thing.
But in Australia you can if you're 19.
Oh.
I think I did. I mean, they let us in. But we lived in Darwin, which is like on the northern tip of Australia, in the Northern Territory. It was super hot. It was during the wet season. It was, brutal.
Oh, wow.
Temperatures and weather and everything.
Imagine.
And during New Year's, we got to take a little break from work and go on vacation. And my friend and I, my goth, like the most goth person I think I've ever met, same guy who got me into goth music. He and I took a trip to Melbourne, which is like my favorite city in Australia. And we had a whole list of stuff that we wanted to do in Melbourne. And on New Year's Eve, we went to the goth club, and it was super cool. I think it was called the Sub Club, and that was my first time going to a goth rave or anything.
Nice.
It was really, really cool, and it was the same kind of eye-opening thing where it's like, holy shit, this is like
Community.
a whole thing.
Yeah.
And then that was like New Year's 2020, like right before 2020 started.
Wow.
And at the time, COVID was just like
Yeah.
a couple of cases in one small province in China.
Before,
and then like
lockdown.
just a couple weeks after that trip, the world went
Wow.
to shit.
That's
So it was a
crazy.
crazy time to be alive, My experience with early COVID was pretty terrifying, because I was in Australia, and we were supposed to be leaving in Australia in like March or April of 2020,
Right.
which got delayed because of COVID.
Because it happened right then.
And
Yeah.
and we
That's
had to
when it
go.
happened.
I mean, we weren't coming back to America either. We were going from Australia back to Japan, and Japan put like a big halt on, like, no one's coming in, no one's leaving. You know, what I
Right,
mean?
they were very strict.
Japan had some very, very, very strict laws.
Guidelines. Yeah.
And eventually they got it worked out where they had to get the fucking prime minister to sign off on it, to allow us to move from Darwin back to Japan, and then they quarantined us in a hospital on a military base in Okinawa.
Fuck.
And so my experience in this place ended up being like, it was supposed to be like the 2-week quarantine, but it ended up being like a little over a month, where you're in a room and the only like people who you get to see are people wearing full hazmat suits, like gas masks and like the whole nine, and they bring you your food and everything, and they'll ask you questions every day. They'll take your temperature 2 or 3 times a day. And we had a window. That window showed a courtyard, and I just like spiraled because I was on my phone all the time watching the news, watching videos from like all over the world about how horrible I thought like the world was ending. And like because I couldn't leave this little room
Imagine.
for almost like
My
a month and a
God.
half, as I was just like obsessed over the news, watching everything go to hell.
Jeez,
It was
flips.
that shit was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, fucking trauma scrolling in
Yeah,
this.
I know.
In this very intense environment and situation you're in. Oh, I
Because
couldn't
they didn't tell us
imagine.
much. I was like, well, are we just going to live in this little room for the rest of our lives? Is like, what's going on?
So just as a person listening to your story, what was the feeling like when you were able to leave?
Yeah, when you
When you had some space to
Yeah.
move and get away from that.
It's well, 2 days after I got out of quarantine in Japan, I flew back to Hawaii. And
did you have to go through
and then I got
quarantine?
quarantined
Why?
again in
Goddamn.
Gosh.
but that was only for 2 weeks. So
I was about to ask, well, all of this is happening. Where's your head at about wanting to be a part of the business and your decision to move to Las Vegas?
so at the time, so I joined the military in 2018, and I signed a 4-year contract, and I learned just a few months in, I had my like discovery that I was trans, you know? So it's like just a few months into being in the military, right out of boot camp, I was like, oh shit. and so I was closeted for a long time. And when I was in Australia, I met 2 people who became like the only friends that I had. I mean, my time in Australia was actually really miserable. It was horrible. I love Australia as a place, and I loved being there. It's one of my favorite countries. So I was so excited to go.
But personally,
But my experience there, the people I was around, and the work, we were working 6 days a week, sometimes 12-hour days.
So circumstantial, it was shit.
And I hated my job.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun.
Yeah.
It was not fun. But those 2 friends that I made, they were like the first 2 people who I ever opened up to about being trans. They were really, really supportive about it, and they were super cool. Very, very cool about it. So much so that one of them, the guy who I went to Melbourne with, he actually bought me a dress, and it was like the only piece of gender affirming clothes that I had for like a couple years, and I wore it like every fucking day.
Oh my
like,
yeah.
For like, if you look at any pictures of me, where I was, in like gender affirming clothes, from like 2020 up to like 2021 and a half, I was always wearing the same dress because it's the only thing I had. It was the same dress, the same wig, and I wore that shit all the fucking time because I had to shave my head every weekend,
Oh,
'cause I was still in the Marine Corps. So,
I'm going to go a little bit outside the auspices of the story that you're telling. And I just got to ask something super specific and maybe a little bit weird. I know that, like, as my trans experience goes, the idea of wigs are something that you kind of experiment with,
yeah,
right?
very much so.
Now, you say you have to shave your head every day in the military.
Every weekend, yeah.
Every weekend.
Every Monday you had to show up with a fresh haircut, and if you didn't, you get written up for it. And I got in trouble for it all the time.
So, but you actually had a wig, maybe a specific wig? Is that what I'm to understand?
I had a few throughout the time, but
had a
there was
few.
there was one specific wig that I bought maybe 9 or 10 times. It was like $10 on Amazon, and for whatever reason, it just like it was like the most gender affirming thing ever. It was like literally for me in the mindset that I was in, I was like I had to meet all of these male standards all day, every day. And as soon as I get off, I get free time, I put that on, and it's like I'm a woman,
Right.
It was
right.
crazy. It was a really like thing.
Connect to your inner self. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to me to hear your story because I have a completely different mindset. And to just make it short and sweet, I never had to I've never been in that position. I've always been able to have long hair. And I remember, this is maybe about 10 years ago, experimenting with wigs over my already long feminine hair and trying to find hair looks that reaffirmed femininity.
Yeah.
And I already had long hair, and I'd buy these wigs. I'd put them on my head over my long hair, and I'd tie my hair back and put a hair thing on and do the thing. And I always felt really fake. It was never gender affirming. I felt like I was I felt like I was being fake. And I felt at this time, this is what makes it germane to what you're saying, I always felt like, well, if I just shaved my head, this feminine wig would actually sit on my head in a way that would actually look feminine, and I'd be self-affirming. And so that's a really weird thing, like something that you had to do,
Yeah.
and you had to shave your head, and you had wigs.
I mean, it wasn't like razor shaved. It was like a buzz cut. It was
but
a high
like
and tight.
you didn't have.
You had an
like,
obligation, though.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
required.
It's not something that any trans person would want to do at all. So if you have an obligation, like,
The male standards in the Marine
Yeah.
Corps are very, very, very brutal.
yeah,
And they,
absolutely.
yeah, it sucked having to meet that every.
I went to juvenile boot camp, so they were trying to fucking
Yeah, the high
drill
and
that
tights and-
bullshit
yeah.
into me too. I was like, fuck that. Yeah.
Well, so I had known, right? Like going back in realistically figuring out that I was trans, I kind of looked back in my life and I was like, holy shit, how did I not know this sooner? But like I had watched a lot of porn throughout my time growing up, you know? And I think I had always thought to myself, like, wow, if I was a girl, that's the life that I would want to live. That's what I'd want to do. And then I realized that I was trans when I was in the Marine Corps, and you cannot do porn when you're in the Marine Corps. I mean, there's technicalities that allow you to, but you need to get your commanding officer to approve it. And if you don't have
That's
prior, if you don't have prior approval, it's unbecoming of a Marine to act in porn, and you can get NJP'd for it. You can get in a lot of trouble for it. Yeah, like you can't do porn in the Marine Corps.
Oh yeah. So I was
just
like,
can't. You
yeah,
really can't.
I thought that was a thing.
You pretty much can't.
Like,
No, you really can't.
You said you can ask. No, I said no. Like I thought you couldn't, and you
Yeah.
said you can ask your commanding officer. I'm
There's
like, what?
technically you are. It's there are technical ways that you can get approved to do it, but I don't think that, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think that there's anyone in the Marine Corps as a commanding officer who would approve that.
Yeah, I imagine not.
I don't think anyone
Yeah.
would. I know people have got caught doing it and they get in trouble for it because they don't tell anyone they're doing it. They get found, they get reported, and
That's
then
sex work stigma in general. You
well,
get
yeah.
caught anywhere doing anything.
So I kind of knew. I was like, as soon as I get out of the Marine Corps, I'm doing porn.
I see. Just to bring up something, I've been around long enough, and I've been in the dating pool. I've had a lot of trans girls that I've been partners with, and it's come up more often than not to where I like remark on it. There's a lot of trans girls that have spent time
In the military.
In the military.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
That is kind of bizarre. Where do you think that comes from?
I can tell you that, at least in my experience in the military, I met one trans person.
Really?
Yeah. Well, but then again, I was just in the Marine Corps and I was at a very small station. But there was only one other trans person, and he was pretty much closeted. He was a trans guy. And he wasn't, he was very much out. I said that wrong. He was very, very out, but he more or less passed, because he would also shave his head as low as you were allowed in female standards.
All
And
those different standards.
very, very different standards. You're not allowed to like shave your head completely as a woman in the Marine Corps, at least. But he would buzz cut his hair as short as was allowable. Yeah, but he would like shave his head, and pretty much like everyone kind of respected his identity. I mean, there was a lot of transphobic people, both in my unit and just in the Marine Corps in general. And he was also black. There was also a lot of racist people. So he got a lot of hate for both of those, combined. But by and large, a lot of people respected his, even more so than they did mine, like his pronouns and his identity and stuff. To the point where a lot of people didn't even call him by his last name, like which is pretty much customary in the military. They would use his preferred name,
Right.
which is really cool. So that was cool. Yeah, to my experience, other than him, I didn't really know anyone else being trans.
I see.
I
Now,
didn't hear about it either. And I've traveled around a lot, so I went to a bunch of other units too, and different, stations and bases.
and you were Army?
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sure you said that before. I was just reiterating. So Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you something as you. Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas, or is this something that you may have thought about even? Seems to be a lot of trans people that have, ideas about being in the military. They go in the military. To reiterate, I've seen it more often than not.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to figure out why that is, let me ask you, what drew you to the military?
I'll get to that in a sec. But you know what's even crazier than just trans people having been in the military?
What's that?
There's a lot of trans women in porn who've been in the military.
I
yeah,
know.
absolutely.
That's part and parcel of
Most
what I'm
of
saying.
the experience
It's
there.
like, what
That's
is-
where we talk from?
What's the pipeline there, you know?
Yeah, right.
Well, what personally, I know everybody's story is different,
Yeah.
but what drew you to the military?
There was a lot that went into it. You know, I always kind of like I was in high school. I was like failing a bunch of classes. I wasn't doing super good, you know, and I had kind of always been like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna join the military. Because like I couldn't go to college. I didn't have the money for it, and I didn't really have the desire to go to college. And I was also dealing with a lot of gender identity issues, you know, and I was about the same size. I was actually smaller. When I first met my recruiter, they had me weigh in on the scale in their office, and completely naked, I weighed like 86 pounds as a 17-year-old boy, you know. So a part of it was also like the Marine Corps is like real tough, you know, they indoctrinate. And so I got, I got bit, and I was like super gung ho for a while. And I was very, very into it, you know, about like being a real man and having like what's the hardest thing that you can do as a man? Be a fucking Marine. You know what I mean? So I was like, I gotta do it. You know, and I fucking did it, but
Stephanie, did you have any ideas about going to the military?
No, my brother did, and I was in the recruiting office with a recruiter, my dad and my brother, and I was like, nah, fuck this, and I put down the paperwork and walked out. I ain't doing this shit. Fuck that.
it's not for everyone. And
I remember very specifically being 18 years old, being a trans person.
Yeah.
I already knew. 18, I already knew. I'd already known for several years.
Yeah.
In fact, I was already presenting at 18, and I had a big chip on my shoulder. I was aware enough to go the goth route, which I think is like a lot of girls do.
Yeah.
Not the majority, but a lot of girls do, because it allows you, if you dress goth, you can be effeminate.
Yeah. The trans girl with the choker,
People will say, "Oh, that's just a goth person," or "That's just a person in a band."
Yeah.
You can get those feelings out without a lot of hassle, because under the disguise of goth, people will just give you a pass.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah,
already
that's
look like
true.
you're part of a certain subsect.
Yeah.
But all the while, you're doing it because it's the closest thing you can do
Right.
to be femme
Yeah. Because like
without getting in trouble.
you see a goth person, like a goth man, like a cis man, you know, and they're wearing makeup or like all sorts of like platforms, heels and stuff, and
Sure.
and you don't think anything of it. It's like it's just a goth person.
Oh, yeah, that's
you know?
just a goth
there's-
person.
It's just a goth dude.
For a lot of trans folks, again, not all,
Yeah.
but the folks I know, and I've lived it myself, it's kind of a way to personally discover yourself. To like be out there out loud, but still have a little bit of a safety net. And I say all that to say this. I do distinctly remember when I was about 18 years old, and I was already in, but under the goth costume,
Yep.
thinking about the military. And the thing that like made the military so at that point appealing was that above anything and everything else, it had nothing to do with trans. It had to do with who I was as a person. And I come from a chaotic background.
Yeah.
I wanted that sense of order. See, what to me at that time, what the military promised to me was a sense of order. You don't, like, life doesn't have to be chaotic. You do X, Y, and Z, and then you can, like, just propel forward, you know, with, like, legitimate goals and things. And I love that sense of order. And that's what was really appealing to me about the thinking about being in the military. And then what happened was I realized I was an asshole and I had a huge chip on my shoulder about authority.
Yeah.
And my hate for authority outweighed my want to be in the military.
Makes sense.
Even though it promised some sort of like, we can make sense of your life.
Yeah.
Just do A, B, and C, and then everything's going to work out. I love that idea. But then again, my sense of I hate authority kept me away from it.
Yeah. I think for me, like in what a big part of it for me was that like when I was in high school, I was like a fucking nobody throughout like the vast majority of my high school. Like I was like the scrawny like nerd. I had some friends, especially like towards like the last couple of years I was in high school. I was like, I need to get my shit together, because like I was seeing all these cool people, all the popular kids at school, and they're going to parties and shit like that. They're doing all this cool stuff, and I didn't do any of that stuff. You know, I had spent like all my time either working or just staying at home playing video games. And so I was like, I need to experience more of life. And like I kind of then set a goal for my life that is still true now, is to try to experience as much possible like experiences as I can get. Like whatever life has to offer on the, you know, on any side of the coin, I want to try to experience every possible thing that I can experience. And at the time, as a 17-year-old kid, because I joined when I was 17, as a 17-year-old kid, a guy, you know, who's always been picked on for being the smallest, weakest person, you know, what is the absolute coolest thing that you can do? You can be a Marine. You know what I mean? And so then I talked to the recruiter, and then it was like a sense of belonging where, like, you know, the recruiter's they're gonna, you know, treat you special because they want you to enlist. You know, they need to enlist a certain number of people.
Yeah, you don't become a maggot until later, right?
Yeah. But like when I was doing it, it was really special to me, because it's like I finally felt like I fit in somewhere, because everyone was always like motivating me, you know, and giving me encouragement.
That sense of fitting in.
Sense of fitting in, because they were just like, here, you know, we'll train you. And I would work out. It was like all the like 17-year-old kids who were about to go to boot camp. We met up once a week, every week, with all the recruiters, and we like worked out, you know, and did exercising and stuff like that. And that whole kind of thing gave me like a sense of I'm doing something special and I'm a part of something, you know. Once I had the same sort of mindset throughout all of boot camp and all of my training, that as soon as I got to the fleet, I was like, you know, I learned my lesson. Okay, I think I experienced it.
The reality started to come down and hit you, and your mindset changed. You're like, whoa, we can go a different way.
I really felt like I was a Marine when I was in boot camp or like training. Once I hit the fleet, I was just kind of a mechanic.
Yeah.
A bunch of false promises, huh?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you do a lot of things differently in the Marine Corps, and the life is, honestly, it's not a terrible life. It's just what was shitty about it was all the transphobia, all the like red tape that you have to go through in order to, you know,
like that. Like compared to like the conditioning and boot camp and shit you go through, the transphobia and everything on top of that was probably something more that broke you.
Yeah, because I came out as soon as I got back from Australia and Japan, and like I immediately started the paperwork in my mind, thinking like I'm gonna start this paperwork to get out. Because I was like, I had gotten to like the lowest point in my life, and I was like, if I can't transition, you know, this is not gonna end well. And so, you know, at the time, Donald Trump was president, and you had heard in the news a lot back in 2017, 2018 that they had like a full out ban on trans people in the military.
Yeah.
And that was like a big talking point, right?
Were you part of that?
And that was never actually a thing.
Oh.
That's all the media headlines were like trans people are banned from the military.
Exactly.
But there was never headlines that was like trans people are only kind of banned and you can still transition if you want to. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. That's what the right and the Republicans and shit were fucking feed off of, is that fear to people who don't know any better. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me that at all.
So it took me a long time to work the courage up to go like, you know, come out as like a official statement, because I thought like, you know, as soon as I do that, I'm just going to get kicked out. But I got to a point where I was like, if I don't do this, I'm, you know, it's not going to go well for me. So I was like, I'll just get kicked out and transition and whatnot. But then I was like, oh, you actually can transition. And it took me 2 years from coming out to finally being allowed to start taking hormones, to start growing my hair out. It took 2 years before I got the approval to be allowed to be trans.
And that was after exiting the military?
No, that was in the military.
Oh, in the military.
Like in the military, it took 2 years before
wow,
they let me
okay.
grow my hair out, before they let me take hormones.
So did you have to go to a therapy?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to get a lot of signatures from a lot of
I
people.
can only imagine it's a lot more
Yeah.
hoops to jump through than it is
Yeah.
in a general like public.
Very much
Because
so.
like you still have to go to therapy and get approval. Well, at least growing up in Texas, I had to.
Yeah.
But in the
remember,
military, I can only
like,
imagine.
One of the biggest things that people would say whenever the topic of trans people in the military came up, to people at least in the military or like associated with the military, everyone always said, "Oh my God, guys are just gonna say I'm a woman to get easier PT standards." And I would always tell these people that like all the shit that I had to go through before I finally got to that point, there is no sane person in the entire world who would put themselves through all of that just to, if they weren't trans. Like if you weren't trans, you would not have the brain to do all that shit that you had to do.
right?
It would kill you. It would crush you. It would be easier to work out all day, every day, for every free second you get than it would be to go through that whole process.
And if you're not trans and you do all that stuff
That's what I'm
too,
saying.
put your body as trans, you're going to be trans afterwards. You ain't gonna like where you're at.
Yeah. And then you also have to face harassment and abuse and
of course,
assaults
stigma.
and bullying and
Yep.
stigma and ostracism.
Of course.
I don't want to press you too far, but did you experience any of that?
Yeah.
You did?
Oh, I can imagine in the military that shit was heavy.
Yeah, no, it was brutal. I had there was a good handful of people who were very respectful and they looked out for me and they cared a lot about me.
That's good.
And without those people, the shit would have been a lot worse. But even still, I got ostracized a lot. Like as soon as I came out as trans, I was like, here's the unit and then there's, Gabby. You know what I mean?
God damn. Well, with all that being said, first of all, I just got to say thank you so much for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Because I know there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this. Again, trans folks in their early 20s, late teens, being a part of the military is a thing that, like, it seems to be a common story. And I'm so thankful that you've shared yours.
Well, thank you.
I think
it's
for people that are listening to this podcast, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of, especially people, the way that we're going to present this, there's going to be like kids that come in and listen to this. When I say kids, I say early 20s, 22 to 27 are going to listen to this and they're going to be able to listen to your story and know that they're not alone because it is a reoccurring theme. So I really appreciate you.
It's good to have your perspective on this show about it because
Absolutely.
I definitely have not heard that one on the show yet for sure. And it's like, my only want to go in the military was because they're gonna pay for my college, and that's when I actually cared about going to college.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a tight segue because that was very heavy.
Yeah, it
and
was.
I really appreciate you telling your story.
Yeah.
But for the sake of time, because we only got about an hour for this podcast,
3 hour long podcast.
Yeah. We have about 15 minutes to spend. And again, please come back to the show. We can talk about this more. I'd love to. But just to kind of start to head our way into like putting a bow on the episode, I'd like to ask, gonna do a hard left turn.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, since you've been in Vegas, you've done a good handful of work.
Yeah.
Since you've been
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Now, we're just talking about the job. We're talking about what it is to be in this industry. Is there anything that, how do you feel things are going so far?
Wow, pretty good actually. I've gotten a lot of work. It was kind of slow the first month I was out here. Like the first couple months, I'd say it was kind of slow, but then it just fucking exploded. And now it's like, I could probably, if I booked my schedule for it, if I played my cards right and reached out to more people than I do, then I could probably have something going on every day if I tried.
Let me ask you this. Forgive my ignorance, but are you doing a lot of trade scenes or are you doing studio work? What's it been like for you so far?
Well, I do mostly trade stuff. I kind of got into my biggest desire to get into porn was for the studio stuff. That's like the thing that appealed to me is like I want to, you know, because like amateur porn, I guess I was making that, you know, for as long as I've been able to, you know, every chance I kind of got, you know. But I always thought like I'll be a porn star whenever I start working on sets, doing studio work, I guess, which isn't that's not necessarily the kind of opinion that I have now.
Yeah.
But that was like what I really wanted to do, and I haven't really done a whole lot of it, but the studio work that I have done has been really fun.
Nice.
And I have done some, and I'd like to do a lot more studio work. Studio work is kind of like the thing that I really, really want to do.
Again, this is a industry friendly podcast. Like, I don't want you to say your day job, but you can absolutely like mention Groovy or any
companies that you actually want to work for and all that stuff. Yeah.
Who have studio wise? Who have you worked for so far?
Well, I worked for Groovy.
Yeah.
I did like the typical Groovy like solo shoot, and then I did a hardcore shoot.
Typical Groovy experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've only
solos
that's
and
all
one
that I've done
hardcore.
so far.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
For Groovy.
Oh, okay. For Groovy.
For Groovy. I'd like to do more with them. I do really want to.
Yeah.
And I've worked with some like more independent studios. I just got done working with Dart Tech Studios, which is like a lot of
That looks really fun.
BDSM stuff.
Lots of kinky.
Yeah, very,
BDSM.
very, very kinky.
Is that up your alleyway?
Yeah.
That
Oh, yeah.
kind of-
Well, yeah, she said that she was in the kink community back in was it Melbourne or Japan or what?
Hawaii. That was in Honolulu.
But currently, is that a thing that? Yes, absolutely. But what I mean is like currently, is that a flavor you're after? And
Well, you know, I want to do as much stuff as I can.
Just do it all.
But you know, I am a very, very kinky person. Like
Nice.
just like what I got going on up here is like it's
I see you.
all like kink and fetish stuff and just for whatever reason anything weird just kind of that's what does it for me.
Nice,
Like the weirder it is, the more bizarre
Yeah.
or the more gross or the more extreme it is.
Yeah.
The more it gets my gears turning.
Okay, good. That's good.
But I like doing vanilla stuff too because it's more palatable for a lot of people and it's more sellable and it makes.
It's also a break from the more extreme stuff that you do. You know.
Well, I don't really get to do the extreme stuff very often because I don't really
yeah.
have too many people to do it with. You know.
Oh yeah.
Other people I've worked with, I've worked for Penny Pedals and like
Sure.
Trans
Yeah, old
Midnight.
Penny.
Trans Midnight.
friend of the show, yeah,
Yeah, she's a good friend of mine. We actually have a lot of stuff planned together in the future.
absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
I kind of like dream of kind of working my way into a position in the industry as a producer. I'd like to run my own studio at some point, years down the line.
All good things in time.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any of the equipment that I would need, or I live in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in the middle of downtown Vegas. With
Speaking-
That was the joke.
I have a roommate.
Speaking to the choir,
Expert on porn.
choir.
Expert on porn. 1-bedroom apartment.
I got a tiny 1-bedroom with a roommate.
Absolutely understand where you're coming from.
Now's not the time for it, and I don't really have any money either. So, but
It all-
eventually, I want to run my own studio.
I'll come in time
I would
if
like
you
to.
stay with it.
It all comes in time.
So for people like Penny and also this guy Jacob Style, who is another very, very good friend of mine, and he works for Penny often. He's also worked for Groovy a few times, I think, and Queer Crush and a bunch of other people. So he's like a, I don't know what you'd call it, like a contractor producer, like a.
Independent producer.
Yeah, he's like an independent guy, but he doesn't necessarily run his own thing. He just shoots for like people pay him to do their shoots. I guess.
Oh yeah, independent producer, just
Yeah,
a
independent.
cinematographer.
Yeah, that's what he does. And I've PA'd for him a lot, and
Oh,
also
okay.
for Penny, and
Oh, good.
that's always
Nice.
fun.
You got some behind the scene experience.
That's some very good
That's good.
experience.
I think
Very, very.
some of the behind the scenes experience I have has been some of the most fun that I've.
It's the most valuable as well.
I have a lot of fun doing that. I love it. I'm super nerdy about cameras, and
Really?
Hey, you're in the right
Yeah,
group.
Right
film
company.
equipment. Yeah,
Right company
So,
here.
I had planned on going to college actually in the fall, but I missed the cutoff barely. So I'm gonna try and go next year for film.
Nice. Let me say this because we're coming down. I hate it.
Mark.
I love that we have this kind of conversation. It always seems like we have 2 hours worth of things to talk about, if not more. But we're coming down to the brass tacks. So let me kind of try to wrangle us into tying a bow on the thing. Now, normally, what Steph and I do is for performers, we ask normally. What's 3 pieces of advice that you'd give to up-and-comers? But we're in a kind of peculiar situation. So instead of saying, what's 3 pieces of advice you could give, how about 3 questions that you're concerned about that you can ask old-timers like us?
Shoot, I guess I can't really think of too many questions to ask because, like, I pretty much all of my shortcomings right now, I know what they are and I know how to avoid them. And the answer to some of them is money.
That's
like
most
of them.
Yeah.
But the answer to most of my shortcomings is money.
That's very fair.
Yeah, that's
Which, shoot.
maybe just 1 instead of 3. Putting a lot of expectations on her, Jimmy.
No, I could have come with questions prepared had I known.
No worries. I don't.
Yeah, we can.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything in your guts? Is there anything that you've maybe been worried about, on your own time that like, I just want to know how to do this thing. I just like.
Yeah. I guess my biggest like, how do I do this questions would be about how do you edit?
Oh, really?
Editing is difficult for me.
Oh, wow.
I love
Okay.
filming.
You're totally in the right house.
I'm not good at editing. So I can like using the free softwares that I've downloaded.
What, DaVinci? Or what?
DaVinci and Clipchamp. I think the stock one that comes on Windows now. 'Cause they did away with Windows Movie Maker. So
I
now
know
I
it's
use,
Clipchamp now.
I think I have a very good, simple answer that I can give you that will lend itself to this podcast and that we can talk about in detail later.
Okay.
The whole thing with editing, it doesn't matter what tool you use, whether it's DaVinci or Adobe or whatever the program you use.
Non-linear editing, so it's the same language.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, the trick to editing is rhythm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rhythm.
Yeah.
Well, so like I guess mentally, I know what I want to happen.
Yeah.
I know that I know exactly what I would like for it to do. I don't know how to literally use the software to do it.
Okay, so
That's my
that's
biggest
just a
issue. Is
simple
just,
tutorial.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
that's
like
part
I'm-
and parcel of the program you're using.
I'm fairly
Just get
decent
more used
at
to it.
editing like single take
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
And like take out the stuff you want or
Yeah.
bring that one in and have different scenes that are shot with one camera. But whenever it's like the ones where you've got like 3 cameras, you got to clap them
Multi-camera,
together and then you got different
audio.
angles and
Yeah.
Seriously,
where it's
honey,
like-
Full
out-
productions, yeah.
it's so above my head.
outside of the auspices of this podcast, I can teach you all that stuff.
Absolutely.
I was just going for a more like, do you have any existential quandaries about how to edit? Because when I think of editing, I'm in this business 16 years. I got all the practical matters out of the way. So when I think about editing, I go super deep. I'm like, how does this feel? How does this, like, I already have all the tools and I already know how to manipulate everything. So I was just wondering if you had those kind of quandaries. It feels like you already know what needs to be done.
I'm a
you
big,
just need
like-
to know how to work the tools.
I watch a lot of movies. So like from an editing standpoint, it's like I have like big ideas. It's like I want this to look a certain way.
Okay.
It sucks when I'm not the one who films it either. It's one of those things where it would be easier if I was filming other people. And then also, like, I could get the shots I want, and then I could edit them exactly
Think about
how
the edit. It's what's called thinking about the edit.
Exactly
This
how
is
it's
the
going
edit.
in my head.
Yeah.
But
That's
but
the whole
it's-
thing. That's shooting for the edit. That's what it is.
It's a different thing entirely when it's like I give my camera to someone else, and then I'm in the shot.
Oh, yeah.
And then
you don't really know what you got because
Yeah.
it's more gonzo, right? Yeah.
And then I'm looking at my computer later with like 5 different angles of like the same video, and it's
Right.
like, what the fuck do
yeah,
I
yeah.
do?
This is a girl after my own heart. This is
Right.
somebody that has the whole broad picture in line. You just need a little help figuring out the mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
the same
love
thing with this is something that I'm sure I could bounce off your head.
Absolutely. And
The
again,
exact same thing with digital production of music.
Yeah.
In my head, I have so much music floating through my head at all times. When it comes to actually using a DAW, it's like, what are all the shortcuts? What do all these fucking buttons do?
It's just like it's just like learning an
just
editor.
like editing.
It's just like learning an editor.
It's the exact same thing. It's
Another
like I know what I want. I know exactly how I want this to sound. What the fuck is an envelope? You know what I mean?
Oh,
It's
let me-
all these
there.
things,
that's kind of the situation.
are
I'm at
stuff
with
that we can
everything.
talk about in person.
Uh-huh.
It's outside the auspices of this podcast,
Yeah,
but
play with
I